Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 4:48 a.m. East Coast time. Yes, it is before 5 a.m. Yes, there is a WNBA and an MLB slate along with this NFL slate. So up and early today, 4:48 a.m. We're prepped for the NFL Sunday, August 18th. Hopefully you're having a great start to your weekend. We've got Sunday football. I'm excited. We also have Monday football. I'm extremely excited. But we get a 2-game slate, so not as much to break down. But still excited to get into it. We're going to start as we always do with the quarterbacks, and we'll go through all the positions. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. Getting loads and loads of attention during these NFL videos. Love it. Like 2,000 people were viewing in yesterday. We had like 115 on the live stream. I'll be doing a live stream later today from like 6 to 6:30 if you're interested. You can hit the notification bell just to be notified of when that goes live. But also, if you're new here, I do cover daily fantasy sports. My name is Sal Vetri in the NFL, NBA, MLB, and WNBA streets, sometimes a little bit of golf, but not all that much. And quickly, before we get into some housekeeping stuff, I do have an NFL daily fantasy course. It is now out. It is now live. There's a $10 off coupon, I believe, for the rest of this week. So I don't know if that ends Monday or just tonight, but that is linked down below. If you're interested in the NFL daily fantasy course, spent a load of time on that. There's a guide on what's in it. If you hit that link, there's a little video of me saying what's in it. And also down below, I do have Patreon. I have my NFL tiers in terms of which players that I have highest interest in and pretty much ranked before the games start. That seemed to have gone well. Yesterday, obviously, Patrick Mahomes did not go well, but nothing to do with the weather. It was pretty much Andy Reid and some of the beat reporters were saying that the Steelers put out some fronts that they were not used to seeing in any of the practices and it was kind of like, why'd you do that? You said you weren't going to do it in the joint practices or whatever it might have been. So, or in the tape beforehand. So he pulled him after a half a quarter. So, I mean, he said he was going to play a quarter and a half to 2 quarters, a full half, and he only played a half a quarter. Whether it might have been the weather a little bit into that. So that stinks. Ended up getting him out of 3 out of my 4 lineups for Stidman anyways once the Brady news dropped. So it went decently, but hopefully it went decently for the rest of you. So yes, those things are down below. There's 2 free strategy guides down below. They're totally free. You can download them. I wrote them a couple months ago and then probably almost a year ago at this point for the NFL, but still relevant. There's a Discord. You can check me out on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Been posting a ton during the NFL season. If you've been following me, you know that. And yeah, that's all the housekeeping. Course down below. Patreon. Let's get into this. So, quarterbacks, 2-game slate. I only have 3 interests, and 2 of them are from the same team. And it's really going to depend on who starts to see who's my main interest. So last week, Teddy Bridgewater started, played the whole first half, and Taysom Hill came in, played the whole second half. But now there's murmurs in Saints camp that, okay, maybe Drew Brees plays, but most likely it's going to be Taysom Hill starting. And even if Drew Brees does play a series, Taysom Hill might be the guy coming in first behind him. Hill might be taking over his backup job. We're not positive what that means, but they might just give him the run with the second unit, have him play with some of those guys on offense, have him play some better defenders in terms of the defense he's seeing. So my interest in terms of Teddy Bridgewater and Hill is going to very much depend on who starts. Or at least who comes in after Brees if Brees starts. So if it's the same as last week with Teddy Bridgewater coming in and then Hill coming in third, well, Hill's my favorite quarterback on the entire slate. Not only did he actually throw decently, 8 yards per completion, or 10 yards per completion, 8 for 14 for 80 yards and a touchdown. He had an INT, but no big deal too much. The thing that I like the most is his legs. He ran 6 times for 45 yards on the ground. I mean, if you just try and think about that, how valuable that is relative to a lot of these other quarterbacks on the slate. I mean, I know you have Tyrod Taylor, he can run. Easton Stick seems like he can run with a long touchdown run last week. But if we're talking about overall pass attempts and volumes, Taysom Hill is going to have the 15 around their pass attempts. He's going to have, especially if he plays the whole first half, if there's no Drew Brees and he starts, he's going to have the 15 pass attempts. He's going to have rushing upside, and those 6 rushes for 45 yards equate to over 100 yards passing if you think about it that way. So that's huge. There's not many guys who have that. Teddy Bridgewater, since his injury, does not have that. So yeah, Hill is going to be my favorite guy if indeed he's the kind of the QB2. So let's just say, just for easier conversation, Drew Brees does not play today. Let's say Drew Brees does not play today. If Teddy Bridgewater is starting, I do have interest in Bridgewater, but I'm going to have more interest in Taysom Hill coming in the second half, playing the entire second half against third and fourth stringers and being a guy who has rushing upside. That's definitely something that I want to see. And then, yeah, my second interest, so Taysom Hill is probably my first interest right now. But second interest is indeed, if these rumors are true and Taysom Hill gets to start today, it will be Teddy Bridgewater for the exact same reasons that I was just saying for Taysom Hill. You get Bridgewater, who's a very serviceable and very good backup, and the Saints have an outstanding situation on their hands where they're probably going to keep all 3 quarterbacks, and all 3 of these quarterbacks are fantastic. But Bridgewater, if he comes in and he plays the second half against the third and fourth stringers, I have interest in him. He went 14 of 19 last week for 134 yards and a touchdown. He looked pretty good. Either way, he's going to play the entire half. If Brees is not playing, both of these guys, that's all they have on the roster. I'd rather have the guy playing the entire second half. Now, Taysom Hill, is automatically going to be my favorite play in the slate if he's playing the second half, because then he also has that rushing upside. If he's playing the first half, it's going to be a little bit closer. That's a decision that I'll have to make in the ranks and tiers later. The only other QB I have interest in is Paxton Lynch. So Geno Smith is not officially ruled out today. They said he was getting a cyst removed on his hand, and then they signed JT Barrett, former Ohio State quarterback, but they haven't ruled him out yet. So I don't know why you signed JT Barrett if you're not going to rule that guy out. So if JT Barrett is going to play today and he plays a quarter, and then Geno Smith is still active, and it seems like he's active because he wants to make sure he doesn't lose a starting spot, right? His whole NFL career right now because of the cyst, so it makes sense. If he's playing, he probably sees a quarter. Russell Wilson, I don't know, at most 2 possessions probably today. I don't think they see any more than that. So that hurts Paxton Lynch. So we have to see, as long as if Geno Smith is out, I like Paxton Lynch more. I imagine you get at most Russell Wilson for the first quarter, then you get Paxton Lynch for the whole second and third, and then you get JT Barrett for probably some or all of the fourth. That's obviously really good for Lynch. So keep an eye on if Geno Smith is going to be in or out. The team made some roster moves expecting him to be out, but it seems like he's volleying and pushing to play again, because if he doesn't make this team, who knows if there's ever a Geno Smith again in the NFL. So right now, it's going to be Taysom Hill keying in on my interests. But again, starting news will depend. We'll talk about that later today when we go live, but we'll also talk about that in the ranks and tiers on Patreon down below. I need to drink this really now. Man, coffee is so good. Running backs. So decent amount of running back interest. This will be definitely something to look at over in the tiers. These are not my rankings right now. This is how my stuff filters. I don't know if it's some sort of alphabetical order. Maybe it is. I don't think so, though. No, because it's Austin, then Rashad, then Justin. I don't know what it is, but this is how my rankings filter when I just filter by yes and no, because I want all the guys that I have interest in to pop to the top. So it's just a simple yes and no. So we'll go through them. I'll kind of try and hit on the ones that I have some of the most interest in today. There's stuff going on right now. So a couple of things. In Seattle camp, there's tons of injuries. There's loads of injuries right now at the Seattle running back position. You have probably no Bo Scarborough. You have no CJ Prosise today. They're not officially ruled out, but they're both kind of just picked up injuries. Bo Scarborough was just kind of dealing with in his last practice on Thursday, he had a brace on it all over his hand. Doesn't seem like he's playing. JD McKinnon, McKissick. There we go. JD McKissick. Wow, that's rough. He, as we compose ourselves, he is probably not going to play, or at least he's questionable. So let's just say all 3 of those guys missed today. I mean, you're stuck in a backfield where Chris Carson, if he plays at all, sees a couple of 2 drives. Then you get Rashad Penny, who's going to have to take on more work. And then you get a guy named Xavier Turner, who now becomes one of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. I doubt you see Bo today. I doubt you see CJ Prosise, and then McKissick might be playing, and even if he does, or actually I lean that he doesn't, but even if he does, it's for 5 touches or so. So Xavier Turner last week, who got all of his work in the second half, saw 13 carries on the ground for 42 yards, and then he also saw a target, he caught it, for 8 yards. So overall 50 yards on 14 touches. That's pretty promising, and it looks like he's going to get even more work, because last week, Bo Scarborough, and where is he? I have him down here. See the work he got. Yeah, Bo last week had 7 touches on the ground for 32 yards. So he was actually heavily involved. So there's 7 touches to go around there. Prosise and McKissick, they had like a combined, I believe, don't quote me on this, but like 5 or so. So there's going to be like 15 touches to go around in this backfield, you would think, unless they start to go a little bit more pass heavy. But even if they go pass heavy, that's good for the running backs here. The running backs for Seattle last week had 33% of the targets. 11 out of 33 pass attempts were to the running back position. So Xavier Turner, who had 1 target last week, that's going to help him. Rashad Penny, who had 2 targets last week, that's going to help him. So I have interest in Penny, but I have a lot of interest in Turner, who Penny should see after seeing overall 8 opportunities last week, 6 on the ground, 2 targets, and he caught 1, so 7 touches, 8 opportunities. Penny should see some more run into double digits due to all these injuries, and then Xavier Turner should see a ton of run into double digits due to all these injuries. So that's what I'm looking at in Seattle. In terms of Minnesota, a couple players. Mike Boone is one guy who's just always dominant. He had a long touchdown last week, 4 rushes, 70 yards, and a touchdown. He's always a monster preseason guy. He's always a guy who's pushing for the roster spots. Pretty good special teams player as well. So Mike Boone, slightly outside interest right now, nothing crazy there. The guy I have a lot of interest in, as we all should, is Alexander Madison. We talked about Turner having like 15 or 14 overall touches and opportunities last week. So Alexander Madison looked good last week. They gave him 9 carries on the ground. They targeted him 3 times in the air, and he caught a 1-yard touchdown. So overall, 10 touches on 11 opportunities for 31 yards. That's pretty good. I love the 9 opportunities on the ground. Dalvin Cook's probably going to play today. I love the fact that they were saying, and this is interesting for me to say I love it, but I like that Coach Zimmer was saying that he's going to be their running back 3 for this game because he can't pass protect, or he has to get better at pass protecting. Well, give me that all day. If Dalvin Cook is now going to play and he plays 1 or 2 drives, and then the second guy into this game, I don't even know who the second guy into this game would be, to be completely honest with you, now that I think about it, with Lat Murray gone. But the second guy into this game, whoever it might be, whoever they picked up, it's failing to... Actually, we have them right here. Why am I even thinking about it? You have Dalvin Cook, and then you have Abdullah. So Abdullah is going to be the number 2 guy into this game. I don't really want Abdullah. He made all of his pay last week on 4 carries, 1 long yard. I want Madison, who's now going to be the 3rd guy into the game after coming in 2nd last week. 3rd guy into the game with even more volume against worse opponents. So when you tell me that he's moving down the depth chart, maybe for season-long fantasy hopefuls, that's not great. But for me, in a preseason DFS game, I like that. I like that he's moving down the depth chart. The fact that he can't pass protect didn't really hurt him too much last week. He still saw 11 opportunities, and now he's going to be facing worse opponents who, 1, stink at pass rushing even more, and 2, can't tackle or are worse at just run stop. So Alexander Madison is one of my favorite plays, along with Xavier Turner and Rashad Penny thus far. The New Orleans backfield, look, Kamara played last week. He might actually get the day off today. That would give a little bit more work for Latavius Murray. Don't really have any interest in either of those guys. The guys that I have interest in are the guys battling for the running back 3 spot, which is 1, Dwayne Washington, and 2, Devin Ozigbo. So Dwayne Washington and Devin Ozigbo. So last week, Washington was the guy who had really a lot of success. He had like 7 touches or so on the ground. Main first half running back last week. He had lots of second quarter work, and he could potentially even see third quarter work. So they kept him out there for a while. But then Devin Ozigbo, who's an undrafted free agent, he's been turning a lot of heads in camp, had a really good camp. Didn't really do much last week with his opportunities overall. Still saw the second most on the ground in terms of opportunities. I believe he saw a target in the air. So he's going to get second half run. He's fighting for it, likely gets this running back 3 job, although Dwayne Washington, the veteran, I believe from Oakland, seems to be, or actually, is it Dwayne Washington from veteran? Or that's DeAndre Washington, I think. Dwayne Washington was on the Lions. So Saints last week threw a ton to the running back position too, so they were scheming to throw to the running back. A lot of that was by design because they want to see some of how their wide receivers deal with short intermediate pass routes and really yards after the catch. So a lot of their passes from Taysom Hill and just Teddy Bridgewater were schemed to be short intermediate. We saw some passes to the tight end Dan Arnold as well. He had like 3 targets for 2 catches. We saw a lot of passes to the running back position. Overall, I mean, with Abdullah, even when Kamara was out there getting targets. So I don't have as much interest in the Saints as I do the Minnesota backs, the Seattle backs, just due to overall opportunities and injuries there. But I do think the only 2 you want to look at are Dwayne Washington, who played well last week, and the guy who's probably more of the sleeper, Devin Ozigbo, he came in with the kind of looking at the running back 3 job. Now Washington's pushing him for it. So somewhere to look for. And then lastly, the Chargers. Look, there's no Melvin Gordon. Every day that goes by, really, it's going to be more and more need to kind of see. You kind of know what you have in Austin Eckler, but just kind of certify and or verify and validate that. And then also Justin Jackson. So Eckler, he had 5 carries last week for 40 yards, 3 catches for 29 yards. The man had 8 opportunities, and he turned those 8 opportunities into 79 or 69 overall yards. The idea of giving him more looks makes sense, and I love his wide receiver numbers. Look, this guy probably plays the whole first quarter today. I don't know the exact time he played last week. I think it was just 2 drives, and the fact that he might have played 3, but the fact that on 2 or 3 drives he had 8 touches and turned those into 69 yards tells you all you need to know about him. The Saints still, I mean, their primary defense is probably now with some additions and really just a year off, close to league average, but it's still below. Secondary defense probably even worse. So Austin Eckler, definitely somebody who got my attention. We're kind of blessed in a way with a lot of good running back spots on this slate between Xavier Turner, Rashad Penny, Alexander Madison, Mike Boone to an extent, and then you have the Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson show kind of going on in Chargers camp. So Justin Jackson played fine last week too. They only gave him 5 opportunities on the ground, but he had 22 yards with that, and he had a touchdown. He should see a lot more run. It makes sense too. Some beat writers, I don't believe there's any word from the coach here, but some beat writers have been already saying and speculating that if you read between the lines of what Coach Lynn has been saying is that Justin Jackson is going to get some more run. Austin Eckler is going to get some more run. If they're going to get some more run, obviously those receptions from Austin Eckler are dependent on game flow, but some of them were schemed for. You can maybe expect double-digit touches for each of these guys, or 8 touches at least for each of these guys. I have interest in both of them. I have more interest probably in Justin Jackson, a guy who wasn't able to get into the passing game last week, but he is a pass-catching back. That's kind of where he flourished even more in college. So 5 touches for 22 yards on the ground and a touchdown. I like the fact that he'll face more guys. But again, Austin Eckler, it's kind of 1A, 1B. You can go either way with this one. He's going to be heavily involved, and they're going to probably scheme around Eckler just to see, can he do some of the things that Gordon were doing? We kind of think he can, but can he? So running back's loaded, honestly, today. There's 2 guys from every single team that I have interest in, and it's going to be ranked and tiered later today on Patreon. And you can check out kind of the things that I look for in terms of key stats. Those sorts of things are all in the course down below. Wide receiver, as always, not as many wide receiver options as today. I mean, just a 2-game slate that will naturally do that. So we'll quickly go through them. There's a lot of just overall hype in Saints practice, just trying to get your 5th or 6th guy on the roster today. So little Jordan Humphries, he's the guy who got the touchdown late in that last game. He had 2 catches, but only 2 targets for 41 yards and a touchdown. The running backs, as we were saying, had a ton of checkdowns. They were like 33% of the targets went to the running backs, so 33 pass attempts, as I was saying. I might have said the wrong team at first, but it was the Saints. 33 pass attempts, 11 of them went to the running back position. So that's going to hurt. And when you scheme that way, that's going to overall hurt. Hopefully, maybe they scheme differently, see if Teddy Bridgewater can actually throw the ball deep. So Grayson Hill Jr. also had 2 targets, caught 2 balls for 32 yards last week. Slight interest. My main interest is one, Jordan Humphries from New Orleans in terms of just per team, right? Not the overall slate yet. And then Emmanuel Butler. Emmanuel Butler missed last week. He's been turning heads and having it quite the good camp. He was injured, rookie. I believe he was he undrafted? I can't recall right now, but yeah, rookie. He's going to be back today. He might actually start this game. That would actually hurt him. I wouldn't want that. I'd rather Jordan Humphrey than little Jordan Humphrey. If he doesn't start, comes in with the second unit, I like his chances. Probably plays a quarter and a half to 2 quarters. And again, they're fighting for this 5th and really 6th spot on this roster. Minnesota, the quarterbacks overall, they're just stink. The wide receivers overall just stink. Have interest in the running backs, as we said. Have interest, as we'll see, in the tight ends. Minnesota, though, nothing really stands out here for me. I guess the only one would be Busy Johnson, or I guess his real name is Ola Busy Johnson, but they just call him Busy Johnson. He had 2 catches on 2 targets for 35 yards and a touchdown. He was the most targeted wide receiver. Just let that sink in. Just let that sink in. He's the most targeted wide receiver. He's likely their number 4 wide receiver right now, and he's been running with the 2s in practice, which is an indicator that not only was his preseason and just a beat writer talk of him being the number 4, just all hype and no really substance behind it. He now moved up to starting to play with the 2s, which would indicate that he's the 3 or the 4, and with Chad Beebe already being the 3 out there, or at least cemented in as the 3 for now. It seems like Busy Johnson is the number 4 out there, but really no other Vikings stand out. And honestly, wide receiver on the slate is very, very flimsy and not that great. But if we scroll down, really no other Vikings stand out at all. I didn't have interest in either of these guys. Brandon Zylstra, if I had to say one, would be the guy. Jeff Badgett is a guy who has a lot of speed and upside, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to kind of come together and cultivate right now. And again, the quarterback play for these Vikings behind Kirk Cousins, which is going to be pretty much this entire game, is just disgusting. Seattle wide receivers, this is where most of my interest lies. Look, DK Metcalf, he had 1 catch on 4 targets for 8 yards last week. People are going to see that and go, oh, gross. No, DK Metcalf he played really well. He got behind 2 defenders on the outside twice, and Geno Smith overthrew him. He would have had at least 1 DK touchdown or at least 2 30-plus yard catches. So DK, totally on my radar, going to get more run, playing at least probably a minimum of a quarter in this game. And hopefully, I don't want to wish hopeful on Geno Smith being out, but if Geno Smith is indeed out, he's going to get better quarterback play and Paxton Lynch around him, or at least you would think so based on last week and based on just the overall trajectory of these camps and the news coming out of them. So a lot of interest in DK Metcalf. Jazz Ferguson, he was the guy who stood out last week. He's all the way down the roster bubble. This is very interesting. So for Jazz Ferguson, Pete Carroll said, there's guys at the bottom of our roster who are talented at wide receiver, and they're probably auditioning for another team. I think he was just pretty much saying, hey, Jazz, you're not on this team. Go out there and do whatever you can. He said that this week after Jazz already had a good practice. So 4 catches on 4 targets for 51 yards and a touchdown last week. He had a good rapport with Paxton Lynch. Paxton Lynch should see a lot more time in this game, especially if Smith is out. He was an undrafted rookie. He came to camp 12 pounds lighter. And again, he seems like he's auditioning for a new job. According to Pete Carroll, saying the bottom of the wide receiver chart right now, most of those guys are auditioning for a new job literally like 2 days after Jazz Ferguson played well. You hate to hear that, but what that tells me is, okay, they are just going to give this guy run. They think he's good. Maybe he kind of keeps surprising them and he jumps some other guys, but it seems like they kind of already know where they want to go. Their first 4 starters are almost locked in or virtually locked in at this point. It's really a battle for the 5th and 6th spot, and you have so many guys battling for it between Gary Jennings, John Ursha, Jazz Ferguson, and then like 3 to 4 other guys depending on injury. Gary Jennings is another guy. He's had a lot of hype in camp. He had his best day of the entire camp season on Monday. I mean, all over beat writers on Twitter were just saying this guy's catching every single thing that's coming to him, and they say that a lot, but it was all over the place. It was after the practice. Russell Wilson had an interview just like specifically about Gary Jennings, so there's some hype coming out there. Hopefully he's doing well, make better on his no targets, no catches, no touchdowns on no targets, or 2 targets last week effort. He's a 4th round pick for them. Seems like they want him to succeed. Pretty good speedster, but he also has a pretty dominating overall build at the wide receiver position. And then John Ursua, I believe that's right. John Ursua, he had 1 catch for 23 yards on 2 targets. He's another guy at the bottom of the depth chart right now, battling with the Jazz Ferguson for maybe the 6th spot if they take 6 wide receivers. He led the FBS in touchdowns last year. He's a guy who they were excited to see, excited that he actually got on the field last week after dealing with some injuries early on. So out of all these guys, I like DK Metcalf, I like Jazz Ferguson, and then Gary Jennings probably 3rd if I had to rank them. Chargers, another team where there's really not much wide receivers that I have any interest in, similar to Minnesota, and that's what's making this slate overall not great. There's not really any standouts. I mean, aside from DK Metcalf, there's no standout really wide receivers. Maybe you can argue Emmanuel Butler or Little Jordan Humphrey. But Malachi Dupre, I believe the Packers drafted Malachi Dupre last year, maybe I'm wrong. But right now he's kind of in line for the 4th wide receiver spot, which isn't saying much because right now all they have is Keenan Allen, who's questionable for this game. Doubt he plays anyways. Mike Williams, and then Travis Benjamin, the veteran. After that, the 4th guy in the 4th roster, 4th and 5th, and even 6th roster spots for this Chargers team are all up in the air. Dupre was the guy who had the best game last week for really all wide receivers, 2 catches for 32 yards on 3 targets. It's just a matter of, similar to Minnesota, after Kirk Cousins comes out of the game, after Phillip Rivers comes out of the game for the Chargers in this one, and similar to Minnesota, meaning that there's nobody else after Kirk Cousins, but similar there, after Phillip Rivers comes out of the game, if he even starts, the quarterback play is just disgusting. Like last week, it was just all over the place in terms of no real drives put together. He's the front runner right now for the wide receiver four spot, like we were saying, showed some early indications last week that he can play as a wide receiver 4 against second-team units. Hopefully he continues to get that run, but the just overall, it's kind of disgusting what there is out there. I'm going to be focusing on Seattle and New Orleans for my wide receivers. That doesn't mean I'm only playing those guys, but I'm going to have to break down deeper into the Chargers depth chart, where outside of kind of Malachi Dupre, some of the other bottom guys that are fighting for some roster spots right now, a guy named Artavius Scott, Justice Liggins had a nice practice a couple days ago, read a little bit about him, but mainly these are the guys that I'm going to be targeting. Again, it's a 2-game slate, so there's not much to pull from. I'm not going to try and make something out of nothing. And also, I had this written down for the Chargers. Last week, they only had 23 pass attempts, 23 the entire game through like 3 quarterbacks, and 8 were to the running back. So what that says is that there was 35 pass attempts to the running backs last week for the Chargers. So we were talking about the Chargers earlier about pass attempts to them. We said that the 11 to 33 for the Saints, 8 to 23 for the Chargers. So much less volume overall, so that's not great. But 8 to 23 were to the running backs. We know that 3 were already to Austin Eckler. The other 5 were split up in terms of targets. 1 was to Justin Jackson, wasn't converted. So that's where we're at with that. Let's get on to the tight end. Did I miss a running back? I believe I did. Yeah, Tremaine Pope for the Chargers. He actually had 9 opportunities last week, very sneakily. He had 3 targets and 2 catches in the receiving game to go along with 6 attempts. I much prefer kind of a Justin Jackson to him, maybe even an Austin Eckler, depending on opportunities. But 9 opportunities is a lot to sort of ignore from last week. Pope going to be in the 3rd and 4th stringers in the second half going out there. He's a deep sleeper right now. We'll see where he ends up in my rankings. Tight end. So tight end, not really much here. I mean, it's a 2-game slate. Tight end's disgusting anyways. Maybe you go to Hunter Henry, who had like 2 targets for 15 yards, caught both of them last week, and just hope that something happens. I think there's a couple of viable options. I think Dan Arnold, last week he had 2 catches on 3 targets for 27 yards and a touchdown for New Orleans. A.J. Derby, also from New Orleans. I believe he was picked up from Miami. Maybe the Titans. I know he's on both of those teams, I believe. 2 catches on 4 targets for 13 yards. But the guy I care about the most is Irv Smith Jr. I was all over Irv Smith Jr. last week. He had been just excelling in camp. He's a tight end who they put out wide, they put in the slot, they put on the line as a tight end usually should be, and then they put in the backfield as a fullback, but not just a block, to actually go out on wheel routes. So this is a guy who's so versatile, getting just so many great praises coming out of camp. He caught 3 of his 21, or he caught 3 balls for 21 yards on different sites. I've read like 4 or 5 different sites in terms of stats, in terms of analysis. Some say he had 6 targets, some say he had 7. Maybe one of those was a throwaway in there and they just indicated it to him. But even if we say that he only had 6 targets as a tight end position, 3 for 21 on 6 targets, that's pretty good. The 3 for 21 alone is pretty good, but 6 targets, seeing that there's more opportunity there, really good. Now, overall, he had a really bad game last week. He had a couple of drops. He had in terms of lining up, he had a penalty for lining up, maybe in the neutral zone, I don't remember, but he had a penalty for that, or illegal formation, and that was like on him. I think he had 2 drops out of those targets, so not great, but they're going to keep giving this kid work. Rudolph's the obvious starter, probably plays a series or 2, but I have more interest in Irv Smith getting a lot more run, being more versatile, and those opportunities last week are what's standing out. Now, again, you can go to Hunter Henry like we saw last night. Delaney Walker had a touchdown on the team's 3rd series. Now, that touchdown really never happens if the team just plays decent on the 2nd series. The coach was pretty pissed. They put him out there for a 3rd series. The offense for the Titans, and then Walker came through with a touchdown. I don't think any of these starting units in terms of tight ends play 3 series. I think Hunter Henry plays 2 at most. I think Kyle Rudolph, if he plays 2 at most. And that's really it. I'm not going to be getting to Tyler Conklin, who had 2 catches for 56 yards on 2 targets. He had a 34-yarder and a 22-yarder, so good to see them targeting him downfield. But I just like the overall opportunities better for a guy in Irv Smith Jr. and even A.J. Derby or Dan Arnold. So that's where I'm at right now. The only other guy who stood out at all was Wes Saxon for Seattle, 1 catch for 26 yards on 1 target. But again, it's 1 opportunity. So my main interest at tight end right now is Irv Smith Jr. number 1. Then Dan Arnold 2, then A.J. Derby 3. If I had to put a 4th in there, it'd probably be Hunter Henry and just hope he scores a touchdown on the 1 drive or the 2 drives he plays. But this is it right now. Hopefully this helps. 5:13. Got this video done early. Going to be making the MLB video next. Best of luck. Again, follow me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Twitter blew up yesterday. We had like 100 new followers. That was fantastic. Hit the subscribe button. We just broke through 6,200. We're on to 7,000. I want to get to 7,000 before the season starts. I think there's a really good chance we can. 2 weeks left to do so. So appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. Try not to be an asshole in there. A lot of people like to do that as of late. But yeah, appreciate it. My name's Sal. You already know that. Peace out, gang.